All right, there's one thing I want to talk about today. Let me draw a circle. We know a circle is 360 degrees. However, for today, and we started actually seeing it yesterday, we have it in let's call that my x-axis, let's call that my y-axis. I know the whole circle is 360 degrees, but when I travel from one axis, I'm always going to start here on the right of my x-axis, on the positive side of the x-axis. Once again, the whole thing is 360. When I travel from one axis to another axis, that should be 90. Notice how my x and my y-axis cut the circle in 4 parts. We said it was 360 degrees, the whole circle. So shouldn't each of these be 90? So every time I go from an axis to another axis, so I started on the x-axis and I traveled to the y-axis. That's 90 degrees. Now from the y-axis to the x-axis, that's another 90 degrees. From the x-axis to the y-axis, that's another 90 degrees. And from the y-axis to the x-axis is another 90 degrees. So once again, when I travel from one axis to another axis, I will be getting 90 degrees each time. Okay, so having that said, we need to find the measure of each angle. Couple more things. So let's call those the axis, the x and the y-axis. I'm always going to start on the right side of my x-axis. If I travel counterclockwise, so if I go this way, my angle is going to be positive. We always travel counterclockwise. However, sometimes I will travel I want to travel clockwise, and that's going to be negative. So let me say that again. If my angle is counterclockwise, so I go against the clock, counterclockwise, I'm talking about this case, my angle is positive. If I go clockwise, talking about this other case, if I go clockwise, my angle is going to be negative. So for today's work, some of our angles are positive, some of our angles are negative. The sign just tells us whether we went counterclockwise positive or clockwise negative. All right, let's take a look at number 13. I start here, right? I'm gonna go in the highlighter where I start. Remember I said when I travel from one axis to another axis, that's 90 degrees. So that's 90. That's another 90. That's another 90. And that's another 90. So far I have 360. However, I need to go more. This more. And this more happens to be 40 degrees. I know because it says here. So that angle, if I was to add all the numbers, 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 40, that happens to be 400. So my angle is 400. Now in the direction, notice how I went clockwise. So that means it's a negative 400. Let's take a look at example number 14. And I'm going to start here. And I'm going to go that much. So that's 90 so far. Then I'm going to go this. That's another 90. Now, it would be nice if I knew how much is this. 2 ways how we can do this. I know one thing I can do is I could go this much. I could go another 90. So I could go 90 plus 90 plus 90. That's 270. And take away 65. Because if you notice, let me go in green. I don't have this much. So basically everything that I have highlighted, that's 270 minus 65. That's one way of solving these. Another way we can solve this, we can just say, well, it would be nice if I knew how much is this. I know this whole thing in green, this whole thing is 90. Part of it is 65. So shouldn't I just say this is 25? Right, because 65 plus 25 is 90. So I could have just said this right here, it is 25. So another way I could have solved this could have been 90 plus 90 plus 25. Either way you solve this, you're going to get 205. We went counterclockwise, so that means it is positive 205. Let's take a look at number 15. Let me go. That's 90 so far. That's another 90. That's 90. That's another 90. That's another 90. That's another 90 right there. So far we have a whole circle. And then there's another 90. Remember I said when I travel from one axis to another axis, in the circle it's 90 degrees. And then I need to add, let me go in orange actually, what I need to add, this much. And that much is 20 degrees. So if I add my 90s, 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90, right, it is 5 90s. So instead of going 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90, repeated addition, isn't that 90 times 5? So I have 95 times plus 20. I know 90 times 5 is 450 plus 20. That's going to give me 470. We went counterclockwise, so that means this is positive. Lastly, let's take a look at number 16. This is 90. This right here, it is 80. 90 plus 80, isn't that 170? We went counterclockwise, so positive. If I go clockwise, like number 13, to remember my angle is negative. If I go counterclockwise, my angle is positive. All right, now another thing, we're going to start looking at what we call radians. Now, radian is how we measured a circle. We have 360 degrees. You know, one circle is 360. However, we're going to start using this measurement that we call radians. Now, radians, a whole circle, is going to be 2 pi. So now if I, just come over and say, oh, you have 4 pi, you have 2 circles. Each circle is 2 pi in the radians. So 360 degrees is the same thing as 2 pi radians. Okay, so here we have convert each degree measured into radians and each radian measured into degrees. So if we're given degrees, as an example, I have degrees here or degrees here. If we're given degrees, change it into radians. If we're given radians, I see an example here. I see an example here. If we're given radians, change that to degrees. All right, so how are we going to do that? Let's see. Looking at number 17, we start with 3 pi over 2. And I'm going to multiply this by 1. Every time you multiply by 1, you don't change the value. However, my 1, in this case, the way I'm going to write 1, I'm going to write 360 over 2 pi. Since I said earlier that 360 degrees was the same thing as 2 pi, in a fraction when the top and the bottom are equal, that's just a 1. Now, the reason why, the way I'm going to know, do I put the 360 on top? Do I put the 360 at the bottom? I'm trying to get rid of pi. So cancel the pi from the top, cancel this pi from the bottom. Now 360, let me break that as 4 times 90. You might say, well, why 4? Because at the bottom, 2 times 2, isn't that 4? So I cancel a 4 there with the 4 here. So all I have right now is 3 times 90. So I'm just going to call that 270 degrees. Whenever you type it, just type in 270, just the number. You don't have to worry about the degrees. So that's changing radians to degrees. Now, what if I have degrees to radians? So I have 330. Let me write that as a fraction. Since I have degrees, what I'm going to put at the bottom on my fraction, I'm going to write this as 2 pi over 360. Because I have degrees on the top, I'm going to put degrees at the bottom. Okay, so let's simplify. The way we're going to simplify this, let's see. 360 and 330. Let's divide each by 10. So that gives me 33 and 36. Let's simplify more. 36 and 3. Let's divide each by 3. 36 and 33, let's divide each by 3. So that gives me 11 over 12. Okay, so to avoid making this so complicated, too messy, what I have right now, it's 11 over 1 times 2 pi over 12. Well, can simplify more. My 2 and my 12, that's a 1 and a 6. So on the top, I have 11 times 1 pi. So I'm just going to call that 11 pi. At the bottom, I have 1 times 6. So my answer is 11 pi over 6. The way you will type this will be 11 pi over 6. Now let's take a look at number 19. 150 degrees. I'm going to multiply by 1. Because I have degrees on the top, right? I have 150 degrees. My degrees is going to be at the bottom. Now let's simplify as much as we can. 150, 360. Let's divide each by 10 to cancel that 0. So I get 15 and 36. My 2 and my 36. Let me simplify. That's a 1. That's an 18. I divided each by 2. All right. So far, to avoid making this so complicated, too messy to read, I have 15 over 1 times 1 pi over 18th. I can simplify more. 15 over 18th. Let me divide each by 3. So I should have 5 pi over 6. 5 pi over 6. Nice. Now let's take a look at number 20. I have negative 5 pi over 4 times, I have a pi on the top, so I'm going to put a 2 pi at the bottom and then 360 on top. The reason why I did that is because this pi with this pi cancel out. Now 360 and 4, let me divide each by 4. So that's a 1. 360 divided by 4, that's 90. So far what I have is negative 5 over 1 times 90 over 2. Okay, let's simplify even more. 90 over 2, that's 45. Well, matter of fact, I'll even write it as 45 over 1. All right, so I do have a negative sign. On the top, 5 times 45, that's 225. At the bottom, I have 1 times 1. I'm not going to write this over 1. When I have a over 1, it's not a fraction anymore. So my answer for this case will be negative 225 degrees. Okay, that's the word for today.